Welcome to Empathy Stories, where everyday moments spark extraordinary transformations. Today, we bring you the tale of Jack and Sarah, two strangers whose lives intersected at a humble diner, leading to justice, redemption, and a new beginning. Stay tuned for this heartfelt journey of resilience, community, and the power of unexpected connections. The neon sign flickered like a tired heartbeat against the night sky, its faint glow casting jagged shadows over the cracked pavement of the roadside diner's parking lot. Jack Morgan, once a celebrated chef in Chicago's high-end culinary scene, sat in his beat-up old Jeep, the weight of exhaustion pressing heavily on his shoulders. 2 days on the road, fleeing a career reduced to ashes, had left him drained. The diner, with its peeling paint and faded charm, wasn't the kind of place Jack would have chosen willingly. But desperation had a way of rewriting one's standards. He stepped out of the car, the cold air biting at his skin, and pushed open the diner's creaky door. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and fried food, a scent that stirred memories he wasn't quite ready to confront. The diner was a far cry from the polished kitchens and gleaming tables he once commanded. But there was something about its simplicity that felt disarmingly honest. The booths were covered in cracked vinyl, and a jukebox in the corner softly hummed an old country ballad. Faded photographs lined the walls, snapshots of the diner's heyday, when it was bustling with families, truckers, and travelers. Now, only a few weary patrons sat scattered across the room, their faces marked by years of long roads and hard lives. A young waitress approached, her apron slightly worn, but her demeanor no nonsense. Her name tag read Maggie, and she carried herself with a quiet confidence that suggested she had seen her fair share of weary travelers like Jack. "Coffee?" she asked, her southern twang as natural as the worn charm of the diner. "Black as my soul," Jack muttered, regretting the melodrama almost immediately. To his surprise, Maggie laughed, a warm, genuine laugh that felt like the first real human connection Jack had experienced in days. She poured the coffee, the aroma rich and inviting. "Specials are meatloaf or grilled cheese," she said, eyeing him with a hint of playful skepticism. "Still eating solid food?" Jack smirked. He wasn't used to servers challenging him, but there was something refreshing about her candor. "Is it any good?" he asked. Maggie shrugged. "Hank makes it. He doesn't do bad food." Jack nodded, deciding to give the place a chance. He ordered the meatloaf, and as he waited, he sipped his coffee. To his surprise, it was good, strong, with a hint of care, as if someone had actually put effort into brewing it. As he scanned the room, his eyes landed on a woman sitting by the window. She was hunched over in her seat, her faded jeans and messy ponytail suggesting a life lived on the road. She flinched every time a truck roared by, her hands gripping a mug of water like it was her lifeline. Her face, partially shadowed by the dim light, revealed dark circles under her eyes and a weariness that went deeper than simple fatigue. "Who's that?" Jack asked Maggie as she refilled his coffee. Maggie followed his gaze and sighed softly. "That's Sarah. She's a truck driver, hauls livestock across the country. Her truck keeps breaking down, so she's stuck here more often than she should be. Every penny she makes goes into fixing that damn thing." Jack frowned. "That's tough. What's the deal with the truck?" "Bad luck mostly," Maggie replied, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "But if you ask me, I think the mechanics around here are taking her for a ride. Small stuff keeps breaking down, but it adds up. She stays at the cheapest motel in town, eats here, and then sinks the rest into repairs." Jack's mind began to turn. He wasn't a mechanic, but years of struggling with his own secondhand cars had taught him a thing or two about engines. He also knew what it was like to feel stuck, cornered by circumstances beyond your control. "Let me buy her a coffee," he blurted out, surprising even himself. He wasn't sure why he felt compelled to help, but something about Sarah's weary expression struck a chord. Maggie smirked but didn't protest. She whispered something to Sarah, who glanced at Jack with a mix of suspicion and exhaustion before giving a reluctant nod. Moments later, she shuffled over, sliding into the booth across from him. Up close, Sarah looked younger than Jack had expected. But there was a toughness in her eyes that spoke of a life lived on survival mode. "You're buying coffee?" she asked. Her voice guarded. "Seemed like the least I could do," Jack said, offering a small smile. "Maggie says your truck's giving you trouble." Sarah exhaled, her frustration evident. "That's an understatement. Every week, it's something new. They fix one thing, and two more go wrong. Feels like they're not telling me the whole story." Jack nodded thoughtfully, pulling a crumpled napkin from his pocket. "Write down everything they've fixed this month," he said. Sarah hesitated, clearly skeptical, but eventually relented. As she scribbled the list, Jack studied her, sensing the layers of strength and vulnerability beneath her guarded exterior. When she slid the napkin back to him, Jack scanned the list, his mind translating the mechanical jargon. "This doesn't add up," he muttered. "It's like they're giving you fixes designed to fail again." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "You sure about that?" "I'm not a mechanic," Jack admitted. "But even in a kitchen, you can tell when someone's cutting corners. Maybe they're counting on you not knowing the difference." Sarah sighed, her frustration mixing with resignation. "This town's a tight-knit place. The sheriff's friends with half the people who profit off me breaking down. What am I supposed to do?" Jack leaned back, his gears already turning. "We figure it out. Together." For the first time in days, Jack felt a spark of purpose. He didn't know where this path would lead. But one thing was clear. He wasn't about to let Sarah face it alone. The next morning, Jack met Sarah at the diner. The weariness etched in her face hadn't lifted. But there was something new, a flicker of guarded hope. Jack spread her handwritten list of repairs on the table, alongside a notepad he'd picked up at a nearby gas station. He had spent the night researching the parts and repairs she'd mentioned, cross-referencing them with every bit of knowledge he had picked up during years of tinkering with used cars. "This isn't just bad luck," Jack said, his tone firm but calm. "They're swapping out good parts for cheap ones that are bound to fail. And the ones they're charging you for? Some of them don't even make sense for the issues you described." Sarah's jaw tightened. "And they're banking on the fact that I wouldn't know the difference." "Exactly," Jack said. "But if we're going to call them out, we need proof. Something they can't wriggle out of." Maggie joined them at the table, carrying fresh coffee. She leaned in, her voice low but sharp. "If anyone's playing games around here, it's those mechanics. I've seen them get away with plenty over the years. Nobody's ever stood up to them. Though, this town doesn't like rocking the boat." "That's about a change," Jack said, his voice steady. Maggie raised an eyebrow. "You got a plan?" Jack nodded. "But I'm going to need some help." Maggie didn't hesitate. "I'm in, and you'll want Gus on board too. He's been fixing engines longer than most people in this town have been alive. If anyone knows what's going on under the hood of Sarah's truck, it's him." Gus, the diner's cook, was an older man with grease-stained hands and a dry sense of humor. He joined their table after his morning shift, listening intently as Jack and Sarah explained the situation. "Sounds like those boys at the garage have gotten a little too comfortable," Gus said, scratching his chin. "But if you want to catch them, you'll need more than just my word. You'll need hard evidence." That's when the plan began to take shape. Gus offered to inspect Sarah's truck himself, carefully documenting every part and repair with photos. Maggie reached out to a couple of local ranchers she trusted, convincing them to lend small, discreet cameras to catch the mechanics in the act. Jack took charge of coordinating everything, his organizational skills honed from years in the kitchen. For the next few days, the group worked tirelessly. Sarah's truck was outfitted with the cameras, and Gus gave it a thorough inspection, confirming what Jack had suspected. Several parts had been unnecessarily replaced, while others had been deliberately damaged to fail again. Meanwhile, word of their efforts began to spread through the diner's regulars, truckers and locals alike, many of whom had experienced similar issues with the garage, started to rally behind Sarah. It wasn't just about her truck anymore. It was about standing up to the exploitation that had been going on unchecked for too long. When the mechanics finally got their hands on Sarah's truck again, the cameras captured everything. They recorded the deliberate swapping of functioning parts for faulty ones, along with conversations between the mechanics that made their intentions clear. It was undeniable proof, and Sarah wasted no time confronting them. The showdown happened in the dusty lot outside the garage. Sarah stood tall, her voice steady despite the simmering anger beneath it. Jack, Maggie, and Gus stood by her side, their presence lending strength to her words. You've been scamming me for months, Sarah said, holding up a folder of photos and the footage on a USB drive. I have proof of everything you've done. Swapping parts, overcharging me, breaking things on purpose. It's all here. The lead mechanic, a wiry man with a smug smirk, tried to bluster his way out of it. You don't know what you're talking about. Lady, trucks break down. That's just how it is. Jack stepped forward, his calm but firm tone cutting through the mechanic's bravado. No one's buying it. We got the proof, and the whole town's starting to catch on. You can deny it, or you can make this right. The mechanic's face paled as the crowd began to grow. DINER, truckers, and even a few ranchers gathered around, their presence a silent but powerful show of support. After a tense standoff, the mechanic finally backed down, agreeing to repair Sarah's truck properly and refund her for the previous scams. For Sarah, it wasn't just about getting her truck fixed. It was about reclaiming her independence and standing up to those who had taken advantage of her. As she drove her newly repaired truck back to the diner that evening, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders, replaced by a sense of pride and determination she hadn't felt in years. Back at the diner, over mugs of coffee, Jack looked at Sarah and said, I'm not sure why I stopped here in the first place, but I think you reminded me of something I'd forgotten, how good it feels to actually fix something, to make a real difference. Sarah looked at him, her expression softening for the first time. Well, don't get too comfortable. You've still got a lot to figure out. Jack grinned, raising his mug. Yeah, but maybe I don't have to figure it out alone. As laughter filled the diner, it was clear to everyone that this wasn't just the end of a fight. It was the beginning of something far greater. The weeks following Sarah's victory felt like a breath of fresh air for everyone involved. Her truck, now fully repaired and running smoother than it had in years, became a symbol of resilience and justice in the small Missouri town. For Sarah, the ordeal was more than just a fight for her truck. It was a turning point, a moment when she reclaimed her independence and found her voice. But the story didn't end with a simple repair. For Jack, staying at the diner had stirred something deep within him. What had started as a reluctant stopover was quickly becoming a place he couldn't imagine leaving. He found solace in the unpretentious charm of the diner, the camaraderie of its regulars, and the quiet satisfaction of making a difference. Jack began spending his days helping out where he could. At first, it was small things, mending torn menus, organizing the pantry, or fixing the old jukebox that hadn't worked in years. But soon, his passion for food started to creep back in. You know, Jack said one morning as he stood in the kitchen with Gus, this place has potential. The food's solid, but it could be more. Gus raised an eyebrow, his expression skeptical but amused. More? This is a diner, not one of your fancy Chicago kitchens. Jack chuckled. I'm not talking about Michelin stars. Gus, just little things, fresh bread instead of packaged rolls. Local produce for the specials. A bit of flair without losing the soul of the place. To Gus's surprise, Jack's ideas worked. Together, they experimented with hearty dishes that retained the diner's rustic charm, but brought a touch of creativity. Jack showed Gus how to bake bread, and soon the smell of fresh loaves wafted through the diner each morning. He even taught Sarah how to pickle vegetables, giving her healthy, homemade snacks for the road. Maggie, ever the skeptic, was the first to admit that the changes were good. You might actually make this place worth bragging about, she teased, sliding a plate of freshly baked biscuits onto the counter. As the diner transformed, so did its reputation. Word spread, and more truckers, travelers, and locals began stopping by. The jukebox, now repaired, played a mix of country and indie tunes, creating a warm and lively atmosphere. Booths were refurbished, and the faded photographs on the walls became a point of pride, a testament to the diner's rich history and the community it represented. Sarah, meanwhile, found herself at a crossroads. Her newfound confidence had opened doors she hadn't imagined. One evening, As she sat in the diner with Jack, Maggie, and Gus, a man approached her table. She recognized him immediately. It was one of the truckers who had been at the diner during her confrontation with the mechanics. "I heard about what you did," the man said, his voice steady but tinged with humility. "Turns out, my company's been dealing with the same racket, garages pulling the same tricks up and down the coast. We could use someone like you to teach us how to spot the scams." He handed her a briefcase filled with contracts and a consulting offer. Sarah stared at it, her mind racing. It was an opportunity she hadn't expected, but it came with uncertainty. "Guess I'm going to be teaching some folks how not to get screwed," she said with a small grin, glancing at Jack. Jack leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "You know, there's still a few spare rooms above the diner. Mel would probably let you stay cheap while you figure out your next move." Sarah smirked, leaning against the booth. Funny thing about spare rooms, they get lonely with just one person. For a moment, the two locked eyes. The past, with all its shadows and uncertainties, was still there between them. But so was something else, an unspoken connection forged through shared struggles and newfound hope. Over time, Jack and Sarah grew closer, their friendship deepening into something neither of them had expected. The diner became more than just a place to work or eat. It became a home, a hub of resilience and second chances. Months later, as Jack watched Sarah teach Gus how to pickle vegetables, he couldn't help but smile. The woman who had once been worn down by life on the road was now brimming with confidence, her laughter filling the diner like a song. And Jack, who had fled his past in search of something undefined, had found it here, in the warmth of a simple diner and the connections that made life worth living. As the sun set over the Missouri countryside, casting a golden glow over the diner's neon sign, Jack stood on the porch with Sarah, the hum of laughter and clinking dishes drifting out from behind them. "You ever think about where you'd be if your truck hadn't broken down here?" Jack asked, his voice soft. Sarah laughed, her gaze fixed on the horizon, probably somewhere a lot lonelier. Jack nodded, his heart full. "Yeah, me too." The diner, once just a stop on the road, had become the start of a journey neither of them had planned, but both of them needed. Together, they faced the future with hope, ready to embrace whatever came next. Thank you for watching this inspiring story on Empathy Stories. Jack and Sarah's journey reminds us that even in the unlikeliest places, compassion and courage can create lasting change. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more tales of hope and humanity. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And join us next time for another unforgettable story. Together, let's celebrate the beauty of connection and resilience.